So let me go ahead and start. First, just quickly introduce our panelists. Their bios are in the app, so we won't get into all of their credentials and background just quickly. But first, closest to me, we have Mr. Ralph Perry, is no stranger to TML or to many of you. He's the longest serving executive director of the Tennessee Housing Development Agency. One of the primary purposes of THDA is, of course, promoting affordable housing for low and moderate income individuals and families. Next to Ralph, we have Ms. Michelle Brown. She's an attorney and the manager of public policy for Amazon. She was, prior to that, she had a whole lot of things that are very interesting. But one of them was, of course, she was with the Nashville Chamber as their VP of policy as well. And of great interest to me was her time at the General Assembly and Office of Legal Services. So, and next to Michelle, on the far end, we have Mr. Josh Sanderson, who is a third generation home builder, building affordable homes for more than 70 years for a family-owned and operated business in the greater Knoxville area. So those are our panelists. Just quickly, and of course me, Chad Jenkins, for those who don't know, with the TML staff. And so I'll be playing dual roles as kind of the facilitator as well as providing some city perspective. So today's panel, I don't want to build it up too much. It's kind of a benchmark of sorts, all right? It's the product of conversations over the last few years with the home builders and their representatives, as well as business community, the state chamber, about housing, all right? It follows several thwarted attempts by some individual cities. Some of them are in this room, I recognize immediately. Others from legislative setbacks. But there's also been some success, individual cities with some limited success in this front too. So the point is, I'm hoping this panel maybe suggests that the fact that we're having it, that maybe some of the stars are beginning to come into alignment. All right? Housing has long been an issue. The fact that THDA was created, in the 70s is testament to the fact that it's not new. It's been with us. But the current environment and the circumstances and the conditions currently in Tennessee have certainly heightened awareness and a broader spectrum of interest and attention than at least I've seen. So perhaps that will translate into an opportunity for some positive and sustained progress on this issue. Housing is hard, all right? It just is. Causes, conditions, expectations vary. All right? There isn't a one size that fits all with housing. Any kind of lasting, permanent solution is evasive for sure, and any results are often, it takes time. They're not immediate. All right? So there's also the fact that public discussions also can easily get derailed. All right, there's a lot of demagoguing that can go on in this world. It's not unique in politics, I understand, but it is one that suffers from that easily, more easily than others. So the bottom line, it's not low-hanging fruit, all right? And it's not always seen as a political winner. And so consequently, it's a lot easier to avoid it than to take it head on. So I will tell you right now, before you start to stress too much, we're not going to get into issues or trying to solve it today, all right? That's the good news. No, we're going to start with the basics and take some baby steps here today. And so you're here to hear directly from them as we start that process. As I mentioned, it's a hard issue. And anytime you're taking on a hard issue, you got to have friends, right? And so something like this is going to take collaboration. It's going to take commitment, cooperation, and buy-in from the key players. So I've been doing this for 30 plus years now in and around government, the federal and state level. And I've had the opportunity to work with a lot of folks in a lot of collaborative efforts and seeing even more. The one thing it seems to be, for those that fail, there's a number of reasons why they fail, but the most common reason I would say that collaborations fail is largely because the parties were never on the same page to begin with, all right? They thought they were, but they weren't, and by the time they realized it, it was too late, all right? You have to have, the temptation is to rush towards a solution. All right, we got to figure it out. Yes, let's go. And you start working on the solutions. Well, if you don't have the fundamentals right, you're wasting your time. You have to have, on the basics, buy-in and a commitment and understanding, a basic agreement about how you define the specific scope and nature of a problem that you're trying to address. You also have to have agreement or consensus on what your objective is going to be. All right, so those are things that we're looking at right now, and they're kind of coloring this discussion, not just this panel, but also the discussion that we're having with the industry and interested parties. So as an example of that, I just look at this panel today, right, and this topic. There's affordable housing, there's workforce housing, there's attainable housing, right? They're used interchangeably, but do they mean the same thing? I think it really depends on the individual who's hearing that and what they believe it means, all right? So you could have two folks who are saying the same thing, using the same verbiage and the same language, but they mean something completely different. And that is a trap that is going to be easy to fall in. Some hear starter home. Others hear multifamily condos, apartments. Others hear subsidized rental assistance in those terms. And if you're not speaking the same language, you can get very different reactions when you finally reveal to the other what you meant. All right, so terms and meaning and intent, they matter. And if we don't have agreement on the front end, or we fail to recognize that we don't have agreement, then it's doomed to fail. So our purpose today with this panel is, like I said, it's just the beginning. It's to hear from the panelists, to hear from their perspective, from their company, from their industry, the interests they represent, their perspective on the question, what it means to me, or to them rather. And again, the possibility is that the stars are coming into an alignment, but we're not going to jump to make any assumptions. We're going to start with baby steps, and so that's what we're doing today. So first, with that, let me just start with Mr. Perry, and I'll ask Mr. Perry if you could just share some observations back, kind of paint the backdrop for this and what's going on now. And
well, I'll tell you, I'm going to
You want to come here?
If I can't see everything,
All right.
I'm short.
You want to use this here? All right, go ahead.
Yeah, I won't move any of your stuff. Hey, good afternoon, everybody. I'll tell you, Chad, I'm sort of a glasses half full kind of guy. So while it's certainly a very challenging environment for housing and home ownership right now, there are some things we can do together, and I'll toss out a few suggestions before we're done. But I was looking for a good summary of what's going on. The economists Mark Zandi and Jim Parrott recently released a study on America's housing supply shortage. This is what they led with. There's not enough housing for sale or rent in communities across the country. This means families must pay more for their housing, renters have less to get by on at the end of the month, home ownership is out of reach for many, and those of modest means are forced to live farther from decent jobs. That's quite an opener. It's hard to find a more concise summary of what we're talking about here. And this is of concern to me because all of this hits hardest at the Tennesseans that THDA serves. First-time home buyers of moderate middle income and working people in need of decent and affordable rental housing. Fundamentally, what we're talking about is supply and demand. The National Association of Realtors last week, with their Housing Affordable Index, it is at its lowest point since 1989. There is less housing available for sale and rent today than at any time in the last 30 years. And we all know there's more demand for that. So that is especially felt at what I would refer to as entry-level price points, the lower end of the market. Sales for entry-level homes, the ones priced between, say, $100,000 and $250,000, they are down 26% year-over-year average. Now, actually, at THDA, we're doing a fairly bit better than that because we're actually doing more production this year than last, and everything we do is in that affordable price range. But having said that, we're still only going to do this year maybe 60% of what we were doing before COVID. And the reason for that is there's just not a lot out there that you can buy at entry-level price points. You know, Josh will talk about this a little bit, but the last downturn just clobbered home builders and contractors. Give you one example. In Memphis, 2008, Memphis home builders had over 1,500 members. Today, even after merging with every other home builder association in West Tennessee, their membership is 562. So even if you want to build things, finding the people with the skills to do it is challenging. So that's a difficult thing. Now, we have a few things that we have tried to do to help with that, but, you know, we're also facing the challenge of rising interest rates. You know, so we hear about inflation. Let me give you a real example. Average size mortgage that we see at THDA is $187,000. Now, believe it or not, that's about $30,000 more than it was just about 2 years ago. And a person getting the average size THDA loan today is paying $300 a month more than they would have getting the same size loan a year ago. That's the difference the rise in interest rates has made. When it's harder for people to build, it means you have more people looking to rent, and that's driving up the cost of rents. You may have seen the article a couple of weeks ago. The average rent in Nashville now is over $1,600. You know, I can remember not too long ago, it was maybe $900. So that's a challenge there. What it all goes down to, and this is where, you know, your end of the business comes up, everywhere in our state, we need to build more housing for purchase, more housing that's going to be affordable for your workforce. And as Chad mentioned, this is hard to do. Buildable land is expensive and hard to find. We had a partner here in Gatlinburg. Before they could start construction, they had to move 100,000 cubic yards of dirt and rock to get a place that's level enough to build. Materials cost more. And even if you manage to get them, there's no guarantee you're going to get it in time. We work with a nonprofit partner up in Granger County. They tell me they wait 4 months to get trusses for the houses they're trying to build with our grant funds. Skilled labor's in short supply, and you pay up for it. We used to have, in some of our federal programs, the participants are required to pay Davis-Bacon wages, and people would complain about that. I don't hear that anymore because in many places you got to pay more than Davis-Bacon to get the talent that you need. And oftentimes there are local rules and requirements and restrictions that add to the cost of building housing. And taking together all of that makes it a little more expensive to build housing at affordable price points. Habitat in Nashville can't even build a $200,000 house. That is a sobering thought. So the panelists, my colleagues, can add a little more color and detail to some aspects of this. Chad's going to allow me to come back later with a couple of thoughts and suggestions, and I believe we'll have some time for questions as well. So I'll let you get going. Thank you.
All right, well, thanks, Ralph. So now they have a little bit of context and background where we are. I'm going to start with you, Ms. Brown. If you might just share from your perspective, from your company and generally employers, kind of what are your interests in this subject, and kind of what are your objectives from it? So that.
Should I stay seated or?
You can say either way, whatever you prefer. We're flexible.
Thank you. Good afternoon. So glad to see you all. So glad to see this many people interested in housing. I'm not sure if there are other places to be, but super glad all of you are here, here with us today. So I am with Amazon. I lead our public policy engagement throughout the state, and affordable housing is new to us. We just dove in this very deep water 2 years ago with the creation of our Housing Equity Fund. This is a $2 billion initiative to create and preserve at least 20,000 units of affordable housing. We are starting out this program in 3 of our locations where we have 5,000 or more employees. So our headquarters in Seattle, Washington, HQ2 in Arlington, Virginia, and then in Nashville where we have our operations offices, excuse me. So the point of this fund is for us to partner with nonprofits, developers, businesses, local governments to provide funding so they are able to create and build affordable housing. Affordable for us is anywhere between 30 to 80% AMI. We want to support some of the lower and moderate income individuals and families to make sure that they are able to live in a home in an area they want to live in with full understanding that their wages may not match the cost of renting and owning a home today. We are really excited about the program. We launched 2 years ago. We have been accepting applications, rolling applications. What I really enjoy about the program is that we do not consider ourselves the experts in this. Partnership is key for us. Partnerships with local government officials, housing developers, and home builders is key. With this fund, we view ourselves as a funding source because we recognize that the cost to build and maintain that affordability for 98 to 99 years, which is what we're looking for, can be an expense. Our fund comes in and works with nonprofits and developers and government entities with pre-development funding all the way to moving people in, again, recognizing those increased costs and trying to figure out how we can support. We also recognize that equity is a huge issue in affordable housing, and there are not a lot of developers of color or minority-led nonprofits of color that have a seat at the table. So in addition to that $2 billion, we've set aside $125 million to further this cause. The third bucket of funding is also working with government agencies that we don't traditionally work with. While we love our housing development authorities, we also recognize that school districts are key in communities where we need more affordable housing to make sure that we are providing the supports and wraparounds that are needed, as well as partnering with transit agencies. A big part of our funding is to make sure that in addition to relieving burdens of your home cost, you're also relieving those transportation costs that can also take out a huge chunk of money each month. So we want to make sure that all of the properties that we are partnering with have some close proximity to transit lines and transit centers. So we are really excited about this opportunity. We consider ourselves building the plane as we fly it, so we are learning as we go. We recognize that there are a lot of local, state, and federal not barriers, but just things that we have to overcome to figure out how we can move the needle on this. We are involved in this because we recognize that we are able to leverage our company's capital to provide those loans, grants, below market capital, as well as we pride ourselves in being able to scale up quickly. And so that is why we are looking to work with people who've been in the community and who are able to let us know, hey, partner with Ralph, partner with Josh. They know the community, they know where to build. We are also trying to make sure that our advocacy efforts, which is more of my wheelhouse than affordable housing, is also aligning with our program. We want to make sure that we're partnering on a local, state, and federal level to enhance some of these policies to increase affordable housing. To date, of that $2 billion that we have set aside, more than $1 billion has already been spent on affordable housing across the 3 jurisdictions. We have built 8,500 units, which are helping 18,000 families stay in their homes and keeping their rates affordable, again, for the long term, 98, 99 years. I'm not sure if anyone saw the Tennessean article today, or maybe that came out over this weekend, talking about AMI, that we are trying to stay within that 30 to 80%. They were saying in Nashville now it's $98,000, I believe, for a family of 4. Yeah. And so it's just trying to figure out how do you keep, what does affordability look like? What does that mean? $100,000 for some families is a ton of money. For other families, if you're in Nashville, you can't get a home for $100,000 at this point. So just continuing to keep those conversations open, and making sure that we are available, because we don't view ourselves as the only solution. We see ourselves as a tool in the toolbox, and are just really excited to be speaking with you all to hear about what you have going on and ways we can possibly align.
Thank you. Mr. Sanderson, from the home builder's perspective.
Yes, sir. Josh Sanderson with Smith Built Homes. Probably the least qualified person in the room, but I'm here. My only credential is I was born into a home building family, and I've been doing it ever since I was 10 years old, working in the ditch, working in anything. So I've been asked to be here and represent the state home builders group with my head in the sand and on the grind every day with Smith Built. A lot of the things I'm going to say relates to Smith Built Homes, but I think Smith Built does have a good understanding of what the challenges are across the state. Just to put in perspective, Smith Built Homes is a 400 house builder a year. We build in all the surrounding counties of East Tennessee, work with a lot of different cities and municipalities, so just to kind of give you a gauge. And one of my main jobs is when we're building 400 houses, we need 400 lots. That means we need 100 acres. That means we need to continue to grow. So that's one of my jobs, is to go into the counties or municipalities and talk with the officials, talk with the realtors, talk with the lenders, talk with everyone to see, can Smith Built Homes move into this market and grow. So again, I won't speak, a lot of my experiences won't be directly related to Smith Built, but let's see if I can answer as a whole. But I was asked to choose between affordable housing, workforce housing, and accessible housing. Honestly, we don't like any of those terms. We like this morning on the news, UT just opened back up, and student housing. Right when you think of that, you think of a dorm. The News Sentinel, Knoxville News Sentinel, this last couple of months, they just opened up the front page said affordable housing now open. Well, I didn't know you could just open and close it, but it was about what it was subsidized housing. The city of Knoxville took money, tax money, and did an affordable guaranteed rent for people of lesser income. We need that, 100% we need that. But I'm building, and these home builders of the state are building affordable homes. These people, these home buyers are going to get a 30-year mortgage. They are pledging basically 75% of their income for their life to us home builders to do a 30-year mortgage. I don't want to diminish it down to housing and a dorm room, or they take that credibility away from them. So we're more affordable homes, and that's what our main focus is what is affordable. We used to say if you could work for Smith Built Homes, you could afford one of our houses. That is not true anymore. The cheapest house you can get with Smith Built Homes is $3,099. We used to be $159.9 3 years ago. It has gotten unbelievable, and a lot of it is out of our control. Supply and demand, materials. We all know the lumber. We all know that. That's not for this discussion. That's not even for anyone else to worry about. As a home builder, we're in the risk business. We know supply and demand, we know materials, we know lumber is a commodity. It can go up, it can go down. We get that. What we can't control and want to try to control are the regulations. A 2x4 in California is the exact same 2x4 we use out here in Knoxville, Tennessee. We build 30 different floor plans across the state, and the only different cost is from the wood line down. Once we have the foundation in on the dirt with the roads in, we know exactly down to the penny what that house is going to cost. But what changes the cost of a house is the regulations, which result in time, and the dirt. Obviously, land in Malibu, California, it's not going to take an affordable home. But my point is, a cinder block and a 2x4 are all the same. It's the wood line down the block, the slope of the land. If I was out here and building in Sevier County, I know the slope of the land is going to be a walkout basement. It's going to have more block. It's going to have more material into it. But once I get to the wood line, it's pennies. We know down to the penny what it is. But to focus on this group is just the regulations. It's a regulation here, a regulation there. For instance, the state of Tennessee just this July 1 made it effective that the way we transfer land, so we buy the land, we put the lots in, and then we quitclaim deed it to our home building company. Well, they just decided July 1, you can't do that anymore without doing a transfer fee. The transfer fee is $200. That's fine. We're all saying $200 on a $300,000 house, what is that? But when you build 400 houses, that's $80,000 a year. So any regulation or anything else, that's just gonna be $10 here, $10 there, $100 there. Every regulation results in scale. When you scale it, for us, $200 on 400 houses is $80,000. For someone like D.R. Horton, who's 90,000 units, that's hundreds of millions of dollars. And all that does, that cost gets passed down to the home buyer. So back to we're affordable homes, and if we had to choose one because we want our employees to be able to live with us or in one of our houses, will be workforce housing, meaning our plumber and our electrician. They could actually afford the houses, but that's becoming harder and harder. With the time, one big thing we're running into right now is the municipalities, because of labor shortage, does not have the inspectors, and when we call in for a plumbing inspection, they're 14 days out, sometimes 3 weeks out. And in time, we can't wait 3 weeks for a plumbing inspection to come in there and inspectors show up. And we call the mayor, we call the department head, and they're like, well, we just don't have the labor. We have this many people in front of you. And I mean, I get it, it's a labor shortage, we have labor shortage, but it's only going to get worse. I don't know what we've had some suggestions just for Knox County. For example, penalize us and incentivize us, meaning if I call in for a framing inspection and the house isn't even framed yet, I should be penalized for wasting the municipality's time. Time is money, so I shouldn't be calling in and wasting your guys' time. And I say penalize, and I know a bunch of home builders are just cringing when I say that, but it's only going to get worse as the gray hairs and the experienced builders and the family people get out of this business, and we're hiring millennials with just educations that have read a textbook and don't actually know if the house is framed or not. It's going to get worse. We laugh. If people call in for a framing inspection, the house isn't framed, and the inspector's like, they're all the way across town and could have made it to these other ones. So I'm all about setting up rules and regulations that incentivize the guys that know what they're doing and penalize the rookies, penalize the guys that are sloppy, to not wasting time, because it's going to get worse. There's going to be less and less people. Plumbers can't hire labor, and the quality of work is going to get worse. So your inspectors are going to be on their, dotting their I's and crossing their T's on these inspections, because the people that know how to do it, the workforce, is getting diminishing. So what we need to focus on is training more people to come in to the workforce, and that's not a college degree. That's a trade degree. Our plumbers making a lot of money, and they're going to continue to make a lot of money. And I think we need to. I think our mayor of Knox County is doing a good job of doing trade schools and other things, but that's a big concern of getting our workforce. It's younger. I mean, our average superintendent is 57 years old. We have one guy 72 years old. We just begged him to stay because he knows what he's doing. Versus a millennial out there with earbuds and chacos on that don't know what they're talking about, don't know what they're doing. It's. I'm on a tangent, but
No, we want to hear more.
Yeah.
Tell us more.
I was asked to come up with a bumper sticker slogan, and I'm reluctant to say this, but don't just automatically put me in this category, but make homes affordable again. I know what that translates to, but it is getting harder and harder. The workforce is an issue. The lumber and the materials, we have to deal with that as home builders. The materials, the developments, when I go in, we are a self-development company, so we put the subdivisions in, and when we go in front of some municipalities, they said, you have to use this pipe. Well, there's 2 suppliers in the country that provide that pipe. And that's your regulations say you have to use this pipe. We got to get away from some of that stuff where you can't just get it down to 2 people that made a handshake and made a deal. Be open to it. This pipe is, all these pipes are good. These transformers. Right now we got houses, we're building off generators. We cannot get a house, or we can't get a final meter until the home buyer closes on the house, because the local electric department does not have any meters or transformers to set. It's and that's just hard. It's hard to build off a generator. Again, that goes back to time. I am going way all over the place.
No, this is good.
No, it is.
It's just like therapy.
Well, and I'm thinking $2 billion is not enough, and I thought that was an astronomical amount, and now
We have to subsidize our HOAs because HOA fees to maintain the ponds that we have to do for the stormwater, they have to be mowed and maintained. It's one thing after another. When you're nickel and diming these home buyers that are literally scraping pennies to come to closing table, it's hard to do. Right now, we're losing a contract a day, literally a contract a day. And it's not just mortgage rates, it's debt to income. They not finally realizing that groceries are higher, their cost to commute's higher, their electric bill's higher. They're not cutting their cable. They're not doing certain things, and they can't afford now that they have this contract on the house. One, they can't close on it, and two, they definitely couldn't afford the furniture and everything else to actually live in it. So people are backing out as the cost of living has gone up. So there's a lot of I'd like to end with, there's a lot of moving parts in it. The less we can do to take care of the home buyer because they are pledging their money. They're going to sign that 77-page mortgage document that says they're going to pay this for 30 years. And if they can't get that loan for 30 years, we can't build houses. We can't build houses. There's going to be a lot of people unemployed. But affordable homes versus any sort of housing is sorry for the tangents.
No, thank you, and don't apologize, because that's exactly what we're here for. It may ruffle some or hurt a little bit here and there, but that's what we need to hear. The purpose is this, to figure where everybody's coming from and seeing if there's enough agreement and alignment of interest that we can proceed and move together and collaborate on something. So no apologies, that's perfect. It's real, right? So that's what we're dealing with. So now I get my list. No. So I'm going to attempt, we all know what's going on in Middle Tennessee, right? Bunch of foreigners coming in and jacking our home prices up. No, I live in Middle Tennessee, so I'm a little jaded there. But it's just a lot of influx of population, a bunch of different factors. The definition of affordable is quite different than it was. And the availability clearly has been impacted. So I'm not going to focus on Middle Tennessee. We know in West Tennessee, right? You got your own affordable housing issues because they don't exist, and you're going to have to get them built really quickly, right? With Blue Oval coming in, and then hopefully the train of suppliers right behind it. There's a whole lot of houses that need to be provided, and there's not really plans to do so right now. All right, and they're going to have to be dealing with the same dynamic that we're talking about, and then building those in this environment. It would have been enough of a challenge without it, but with it, it's going to be particularly difficult. So I'm not going to focus on those two. We're aware of those, but your own situation in your own city, you still have the need, right? So in order for a city to ensure vitality and sustainability, I'd say you have to have a dynamic and diverse citizenry, and that obviously translates to housing options. You have to have diverse housing options there. And so I'm not going to attempt to speak to one city specifically. We could have had plenty of people up here. But I'm trying to provide kind of just an overarching picture, just real quick, condense that what we've heard. All right, so generally, you want the ability to recruit new industry and businesses, right? So if you want that to grow your economy, you have to have places for those folks to go and to attract them in the first place. That's one of the first things they're going to look at, besides your services and infrastructure, is your housing and your school system, because their kids are going to go there, all right? So there's also, you have to attract new residents. You got to keep going, building the property tax base, building residents. So you have to attract new residents to stay dynamic and to ensure your vitality. We hear folks talking about, clearly, not only are you going to attract new, but you got to continue to support and adapt to the businesses and industry that are already there, and whatever their housing and changing workforce needs might be. for those that have extensive retail or commercial activity or who have hotels, those workers have to live somewhere. And if they reside too far, then they won't be your workforce anymore. They'll find cheaper options, and their jobs will go where they can live. And so if you have to sustain that type of commercial activity and entertainment activity, tourism and the like, then you have to have a housing supply that will meet that demand and keep them there. And I would say in the same ilk as you have your municipal workforce, right? The ability for the folks that work for you to live, if not your city, close enough where they can still be your employee. Right? And then I think there's a desire just to have availability at all price points. And again, some cities may say 2 out of 3 works for them, or 4 out of 5. It varies, but this is generally what we're hearing. You know, and you want all price points because, again, that gets you to diversity. And again, you're going to have a variety of cities positioned on this one, but your mix and what that proper mix is between rental and ownership. All right, so those generally what we hear from cities and their perspective and kind of what they're looking for and the needs that they're trying to satisfy. And so in that context, we will be looking to have conversations with these folks and others to see if we can't find someplace, a jumping off point of agreement. But with that, let me just turn back to you, Mr. Perry. And if you, there are obviously, THDA's been around, there's things going on. So maybe if you could share some of the options that are available now.
Be pleased to. Thank you. You know, THDA, you know, most of you have heard of us, but I remember when I took this job, the question I got most from people said, what do y'all do? Well, you know, we do finance mortgages for first-time home buyers and moderate middle income. And we have about a $3 billion portfolio of those loans, and it's the earnings from that portfolio that pay for what we do. We receive no money directly from the state of Tennessee. And that earning also translates into the grants that we can provide, the down payment assistance we do, the statewide network of counseling partners that we have. And in addition to that, we run 15 federal programs on the state's behalf. So chances are, if it involves housing in any way, we're either involved with it or we're partnering with somebody who does. So with that broad experience, I want to offer a few suggestions to it. And I'll start with the easy one first. I need you to call your congressmen and senators. A lot of what's been talked about in Washington lately would have the effect of increasing demand without expanding supply. And you'll learn this in school. That's what drives prices up. There is a piece of legislation that will help us expand the supply of affordable rental housing. It is Senate 1136, H.R. 2573. This is the Affordable Housing Credit Improvement Act. And among other things, it would increase by 50% the amount of housing tax credits our agency has to administer. And it makes a change in the bond program that will let us fund at least half again as many housing developments with the same amount of bond capacity. This is actually a bill with substantial bipartisan support. That never happens anymore. Just about the whole Tennessee delegation at one point has supported one version of it. Now think about that for me. You know how hard it is to get Mark Green and Steve Cohen on the same bill? I should get a medal just for that. But the point is, this, if they find the right vehicle, it could get passed at the end of this year. And if not, we're going to try again first part of next year. But Senate 1136, H.R. 2573, a kind word to your senators and congressmen when you get that opportunity would be helpful to us. The second thing, many of your communities receive some of these state and local fiscal recovery funds. A friend of mine calls those SLEFREF. You gotta love those federal acronyms. Some of you are thinking about how do we put those dollars to work effectively in our community. One of the allowed uses is support for housing. Now, there are a lot of things you can do around that. I want to suggest one specific thing. A lot of the developments that we at THDA have funded with bonds, with tax credits, with grants, costs have gone up in the intervening period. They have trouble with their syndication, with their financing, just getting the thing built. They have some funding gaps that your funds might help bridge to finish projects that we've already funded in your communities. And we'll be pleased to help identify some of those with you if that's of interest. But consider, if your city hasn't fully committed its state and local fiscal recovery funds, that housing is one of the acceptable uses. And the tough thing, and of course Chad led with this, and Josh made a point of it as well, the regulatory environment in your community as it affects builders. You know, what are your land use and zoning requirements? Do you have city-owned properties, and how easy would it be to make some of that available for folks who will make a long-term commitment to affordable housing? How does your community feel about higher density? Duplexes, townhomes, those 12-unit garden apartments that blend in with everything. Manufactured housing. I'm not talking about trailers. I'm talking about, say, the cross-mod development that Clayton Homes has done outside of Dandridge. Those things are selling for close to $300,000. And you got to look close to see whether or not they were stick-built on site. They can be built in 2 or 3 months. In some places that have an employer coming in, you need rapidly. I mean, this might be another option. How hard is it to get the permits that you need to build something? How long does that take? Time is money. You're exactly right on that. In Memphis, one of our partners, CoreLogic, a national group, has actually put together a pilot proposal for the city that we hope to try out at first in the Fraser neighborhood to shorten the permitting process from 9 months to about 90 days. That'll make an enormous difference in getting things built. And then, you know, a lot of the requirements that communities have put on, they're all well-intentioned, and there's a good reason for each and every one of them. But when you layer them all on top of the other, there's a substantial cost. And you might want to ask, are all of those things necessary on each and every development? One example, Nashville has a very good rule. If you're going to build housing, you have to have enough parking for the people who are going to live there. I live in Nashville. I think that's a good rule. But now, we had to spend an extra $500,000 to provide extra parking on a building for homeless people who have no cars. So a little bit of flexibility where that's possible and what you require of your developers can also be helpful. A lot of things you can do that can incrementally reduce the cost of building and make it a little easier to develop those things. But each of those things that I just mentioned to you, I know from my misspent youth in politics, these are politically different and difficult things. Because a lot of people, when they hear you talk affordable housing, what they're picturing is the projects. And nobody wants that. I remember I was on a panel once with a young fellow from Harvard, a researcher. Nice fella. He was studying NIMBY, not in my backyard. And good liberal that he was genuinely disappointed to find that NIMBY is just as prevalent among upscale urban liberals as it is in more conservative people who live in suburbs and small towns. Well, I could have told you that. If you think that what you're bringing to town are Chicago's Cabrini Green Towers, nobody wants that, and they're going to fight you. So the prerequisite to a lot of these changes that you might think about is what I call getting the talk right. You got to paint a better picture of what we're building, what it looks like, and who's going to live there. And if you're not quite sure what that is, before you leave Gatlinburg, go visit Watson Glade. Just up 321, head east, make a left a little bit past the Food City and follow Glade Road up into the hollow a couple of miles. You will see Watson Glade Apartments. It's one of 8 tax credit developments that we helped Sevier County build after the fire. And what you're going to see are the nicest, newest apartments in Gatlinburg. But a place where a working family can rent a 2-bedroom for about $700 a month, which is a really good deal. This is the kind of thing we're building. Many of you spent a little time in Nashville. You've been in the Gulch, walked around, enjoyed a meal. You walked right by a place called Owens Place on Laurel. It's a tax credit development. Nobody knows that. Single mom making about $42,000 can live there for about $800 a month. Didn't wreck the neighborhood, didn't increase crime, didn't chase away investment. All the things people say will happen. I can point to examples from one end of this state to the other. This is what we build. This is what we support with the resources that our agency provides. And it's easier to do that if the developers and our local partners do the spade work on the front end, talking to the neighbors, talking to the community about what we're building, who's going to live there, and why it's important that we have housing that working people can afford in our community, especially if we want to continue to grow and attract jobs. So that's pretty much it. I'm convinced that if we do a better job framing it up like that, it'll be a little easier to develop housing that is affordable for the full range of people who live in our communities. That's good for those who live in your town now and want to stay, those who are coming in, and those you want to attract when there's a great job creating opportunity down the road. And I want you to know that we at THDA are here to help you. I got a great Rotary speech. I'll bring it to your town. But we also have programs, we have support, and we will be proud to work with you in addressing the housing challenges in your community. Thank you, Chad.
Well, thanks. So one of the things you do when you get to sit over to the side as you think and reflect about what you said. So just to take a point of personal privilege here, unless I be confused with a xenophobe, my reference to foreigners, for those who are not familiar with what's going on in the middle, is Californians, okay? All right? I'm not talking about anybody that had to cross an international border. I'm talking about those folks from California. All right. So,
That's what I thought.
let me just say, we're going to open up for questions. With your permission, we'll go ahead and write to questions, unless you feel, and we can save any final comments till the end. All right. Are there any questions? Now the pressure's on you. Yes, ma'am. Go right ahead.
So, in the Middle Tennessee area, where there's a pressure for new houses, but there's also a pushback against multifamily houses in a lot of our communities, and a desire to keep the communities, I'll use the word pristine, although I'm not quite sure that's the right word. What can we do to move along the regulations and still meet the community expectations? What would be your recommendations to marry those two to some degree?
For regulations versus moving forward with the projects, I would say I'm going to assume the zoning and everything's already in place. Utilities are already spoken for. Everything's good. Obviously, in any project, there's going to be the opposition, the traffic, crime. I would inform them that it's math. You have a population growing just because of sheer population growth, not even counting the people moving in. So a lot of it's education, in my opinion. A lot of it is education, community meetings, getting educate. We get people all the time, we don't want the traffic. The traffic's coming. You said foreigners, California, I promise you, out of the 400 houses we build, 200 of them are contracts from California. They're coming. And they're coming regardless whether they're going to either live with mom, they're going to live with someone else, they're going to Airbnb, they're coming. So educating them to know that, not turn a blind eye to it, and not being just, being upfront about it. I'm all about being, transparent. We don't have all the solutions, we don't have all the answers, but like Rick was saying, you can walk by the Gulch and you know it's a $700 for rent subdivision. There's certain things you can do, facades, buffering, everything, to lower oppositions and increase project output.
Yes, ma'am.
I have a question with Michelle. Of the houses that you're doing and the $2 billion that you're spending, are all of those for home ownership or any of those for rental?
Great question. So we initially started out looking at how do you scale up quickly, and that's with the multifamily, multi-unit properties. And then when you were looking at the type of projects that are being presented from the Seattle, Washington area and Arlington and then in Nashville, Nashville is very much single family, one lot, one home. So we have had to pivot to figure out how can we incorporate home ownership in this fund. What does that look like? Is it down payment assistance? What kind of restrictions are you putting on deeds? How are you conveying that message to the public? And we get a lot of local legislative support on it, but you're also hearing every day, oh, well, by next year, we need 30,000 new units of affordable housing. We need 40, we need 50, and you continue to run into that land acquisition, land cost problem. So the bulk of it has been renting, and we are pivoting now to look at home ownership, but really trying to figure out how best to make that happen. So we've been having a lot of conversation with Marshall at the Housing Fund, with Ralph at THDA, and just figure out the best way to approach it, because home ownership is the ultimate goal. We know that's the ultimate wealth builder, and a lot of people who are renting do want to eventually own their home someday, but how do you set those parameters in place for long-term affordability for home ownership? So any advice you have, we would welcome.
Yes, ma'am.
And I'm a realtor in Northeast Tennessee for 30 years. And what we are finding is everyone else, you have so many people moving in from California with cash, that when we're dealing with our locals that want to stay there, and we have the houses come up in the price ranges you're talking about, I mean, if I'm representing a seller and I have a THDA loan and a cash offer, and you're going to close, 2 months late just because of the regulation, in that.
Yeah.
I mean,
We do it a lot faster than that, by the way. But
Well-
but your point's taken.
But it really does. We
Yeah,
have,
yeah.
we all want it to close in 30 days, and that's really not the norm. And you've got cash, waive inspection, waive an appraisal. I would love to help my local people, my young family, the people that you're designing affordable housing for. But the price points that you build, when you're doing affordable housing, it's a drop in the bucket. They don't even have to see the house. They saw it on Facebook, cash, done. And, that's how, and I can't discriminate and say, I'm not going to sell to the cash person because it's like the opposite side. And I mean, and when you're looking at yours in terms of what you're doing, what we did many years ago is we had subsidized housing that went to home ownership, and people got, down payment assistance, they got the low interest rates, they had to keep the house a couple of years, prices went here, they sold, those people got all the equity, moved on. Now those homes are in the normal marketplace and they're no longer affordable because the person that you helped took the equity, got the benefit, got everything cashed out.
Yeah.
So how do you guarantee, how do we help the people we want to help without subsidizing for this whole group of out-of-towners to move into our communities? I mean, I want to help my people, but I'm not being able to do that, and a lot of the programs we have are not serving that purpose.
Well, someone who comes in with a bag of money is always going to win.
Yeah.
But I think realistically, the people who have sold their modest ranch home in California for $1.2 million, they are not looking for a $200,000 house in East Tennessee. The challenge for us is we need to create an environment where we can build more houses at entry-level price points. Right now, I mean, if you're a home builder, you got a certain capacity. If you can build a home and sell it for $400,000, why would you not do that? It is a challenge. This is where if land can be made available to a developer who will say, I am building a home at a certain price point, you can put some conditions on that, long-term ground leases, shared equity models, so that the first person to own that house doesn't walk away with a windfall and then it's not affordable again. These things are a little tougher to set up, but you can also work through local homeowner associations that we did this in our subdivision. investors can't come in and buy homes in our subdivision and rent out those properties. So that keeps houses in circulation for buyers. But, the challenge of how do you build at affordable price points? I mean, it's just going to take some time to do that. There are builders looking to do that, but it's a combination of will our material costs ease up? Can we do more vocational training? The West Tennessee Home Builders have got a great program for that. Those kids come right out of school, at high school, and they're ready to go to work making $40,000, $50,000 a year. It's a combination of small steps. There isn't one thing I say, do this, and you got it.
A lot of houses they're selling in California for 1.1 million are smaller than our ranch for
They are.
200,000.
They are indeed.
With less land, and so that same couple there,
Yeah.
and they are planning to live here.
Yeah.
They're not, most of ours are
Oh,
not
no, yeah.
investments,
I mean,
so-
we're still a half-price market for a lot of
Yeah.
those folks coming down here.
And
That's just a challenge.
That's a challenge.
Yes, sir. Sure.
This question goes to Ms. Brown. Ms. Brown, I believe in your opening remarks you said an acronym AMI twice. What does that stand for?
The area media incomes, so those are the HUD guidelines for affordable housing. I don't want to tiptoe too much into
Okay.
Mr. Perry's
Tiptoe.
wheelhouse, but those are just the guidelines we look at for terms of affordability.
We'll go back to Kristen. Dr. Martin?
Thank you all so much for your presentation. It's been wonderful. I'm in a city of around 42,000 people. 2 years ago, our planning commission meetings lasted an hour and 45 minutes. Now they're lasting 3 and 4 hours. We have that many developers who are coming in, and then they're causing our city council meetings to last 2 and 3 hours, because if planning commission votes down that development, they still have an option to come before city council and plead their case. What kinds of things can we do, PSAs, social media announcements, that we can say that we encourage something to happen? I don't even know what I'm asking, but what can we say?
Just shorter meetings, right?
We're there. We're taking our friends' food, right? What can we start saying that can get them on page and on point with what we're looking to have in Columbia? That's my friend from Spring Hill that just asked what AMI is. We want housing. We're building the battery plant right now. And so what do we do? Because they're coming in and planning commission is denying it, and they're coming before us, still wanting to plead their case. Is it something we can start saying?
Can I ask you why your city planning commission is shooting them down?
Well, because they're not meeting some of our zoning, and they have variances. We had one group that asked for a 270% variance on a piece of the part of the actual format. You can't do that kind of variance on something, and then they turn it down. They come to us and want us to approve it.
When it comes before you all, are you all approving the majority of them or denying of them?
We believe in our planning commission.
Good.
And they've been there.
Good.
So,
So the length of the meeting, is it more the agenda item or is the length of the conversation per agenda item? Is it?
then for the conversation per agenda item.
Gotcha.
Local builders or out-of-state builders?
No, they're local, meaning they're from Franklin, they're from Columbia, Murray County, they're from, they're right here with us.
Are they just proposing density that's way out of spec with your regulations?
Density modifications are happening. So again, panel, what can we do to get them closer to what planning commission has been charged to do for us?
Well, I mean, the planning commission is going to look at the rules that city council has set forth. So if you want them to take a more expansive view, maybe the council and the mayor first need to modify some of those zoning requirements that you have. They're implementing what somebody has enacted.
And we had 3 people there 2 years ago. Now we have 100.
Yeah. Well, I mean, here's the dynamic you have. A house is the biggest investment most people are ever going to make. And if they think a proposal is going to undercut the value of their biggest investment, they're going to give you a hard time. And they'll talk about traffic and schools and trash in the park and all this other stuff. But, you know, this is where, and your developers really ought to be involved in that. I think that the way Josh is in Knoxville, you know, engaging with the community up front.